Have you ever found yourself gazing at a picture of Kashmir? You know, those snow-capped peaks shimmering against bright blue skies, the green valleys full of life, the calm lakes reflecting this incredibly deep history, and just wondered about the layers upon layers of human story that shaped such an ancient and, well, strategically vital land.
Mm-hmm.
How do powerful empires, the ones that seem like they'll last forever, eventually decline and fall? And how do completely new cultures and religions, sometimes coming from really far away, actually take root in these old societies?
Yeah.
How do they reshape an identity that's been around for centuries?
It's a fundamental question, isn't it? How that transformation happens.
Exactly. And today, we're taking a deep dive into precisely that, the fascinating world of the Shahmiri dynasty. Now, this wasn't just, another ruling family or some minor blip in regional history.
Not at all.
No, it was a truly pivotal period in Kashmir that fundamentally, and you could say irrevocably, reshaped its very identity. It marked this profound shift from its long-standing Hindu and Buddhist past toward an increasingly Islamic future.
A massive transformation.
Huge. And for this journey, we've consulted, well, a pretty rich tapestry of sources, which lets us sort of triangulate and build a really comprehensive picture. We're looking at ancient historical chronicles, like Janaraj's Rajotaranjini, that's a foundational Sanskrit text, giving us those crucial indigenous perspectives.
Invaluable, that one.
Absolutely. And then there's the Baharastani Shahi, which is a Persian chronicle, offering an early Islamic viewpoint. Plus, we've drawn on modern historical works by respected scholars like R.K. Parmu and Mohibul Hassan, who give us contemporary analysis and help put it all together.
So a good mix of primary and secondary sources.
Right. Our mission for you today is to unpack how this dynasty, the very first Islamic rule in Kashmir, actually emerged from this crucible of chaos and instability. What challenges did its, frankly, remarkable rulers face? And how, across more than 2 centuries, did they leave such an indelible mark on the region? A legacy, really, that continues to define Kashmir today. You're basically about to get a shortcut to understanding a crucial and often overlooked piece of South Asian history.
And building on that, I think what truly sets the Shahmiri story apart is how this new religious identity didn't just sort of replace the old one.
Right, it wasn't a simple overwrite.
No, exactly. It often synthesized with it, blended in ways that offer these really profound lessons on cultural resilience and strategic adaptation, especially during periods of immense upheaval. Like you said, this wasn't merely a change in political leadership.
Much more fundamental.
It was a profound transformation that really rippled across the religious, the cultural, the social landscapes, and it led to this truly unique Kashmiri identity. Understanding the Shahmiri dynasty helps us grasp the intricate factors, the things that contribute to a dynasty's rise and fall, how these massive societal shifts happen.
And long-term impact, right?
Critically, yes, how even relatively short reigns or brief moments of transition can set these long-term trajectories that just echo through history for centuries. It's a really compelling and I think highly relevant case study in societal evolution and the long-term impact of governance choices.
Okay, let's unpack this then. To truly grasp how Shahmir seized his moment and fundamentally altered Kashmir's trajectory, we really need to set the scene first. What was this magnificent region actually like in the, well, tumultuous early 14th century, just before the Shahmirs arrived on the scene?
Right, context is everything here.
Exactly. So imagine Kashmir back then. It's nestled high in the majestic Himalayas, a land of just unparalleled natural beauty. Its fertile valleys, fed by snowmelt and these rich rivers, they yielded abundant harvests, rice, saffron, other crops. It was a prosperous region.
Self-sufficient in many ways.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And beyond its agricultural wealth, Kashmir's geographic location was absolutely vital. It sat strategically along a branch of the ancient Silk Route. Think about that connecting Central Asia, Persia, Tibet, and the Indian subcontinent.
A real crossroads.
A vibrant hub for trade, yes, but also for intellectual exchange, cultural interaction. It was essentially a jewel in the crown, a highly desirable prize for any aspiring empire or, any ambitious ruler.
Makes sense. High-value real estate, historically speaking.
Totally. And for centuries, specifically since around the 11th century, Kashmir had been governed by the Lohara dynasty. This is a long-standing Hindu ruling house that, for a good chunk of time, had provided a certain level of stability and continuity.
So there was an established order.
There was, but, and this is the crucial part by the early 14th century, the signs of weakness within that Lohara dynasty weren't just undeniable. They were deeply entrenched and accelerating. This wasn't just a slow, graceful fade into the sunset.
No, it sounds more like a collapse.
It was a dynasty crumbling under immense pressure, both from within and without. The Lahar rule had become plagued by relentless internal conflicts. You had different branches of the royal family, powerful noble factions, all constantly vying for power.
Standard court intrigue, but amplified.
Hugely amplified.
Yeah.
Endless intrigues, assassinations, even civil wars that just saps the kingdom's strength. And these internal fissures were made worse by a string of weak, pretty ineffectual rulers who just couldn't hold the fractious elite together, couldn't stem the tide of corruption that was apparently permeating the administration.
So internal decay was a major factor.
Major. And adding to that internal decay was the constant devastating impact of external invasions. The Mongol invasions of the 13th and early 14th centuries. Now, they didn't always lead to a direct conquest of Kashmir itself, but they significantly destabilized the entire regional power balance.
Created ripples even if they didn't directly rule.
Exactly. Their raids on neighboring areas disrupted trade routes, diverted precious resources needed for defense or administration, and created this pervasive sense of insecurity. These relentless external pressures further eroded the Lohara king's authority and their legitimacy. It led to this palpable sense of instability and crucially created a power vacuum.
The power vacuum. Classic ingredient for change.
Absolutely. A vacuum that new forces were inevitably going to rush in to fill.
Indeed. And it's right here, in this vacuum of declining central authority, that we see the sort of quintessential rise of new forces. You mentioned the internal decay and the external pressures. In your analysis of the sources, was there one particular factor that you felt proved to be the ultimate tipping point? Or was it truly a confluence of everything just creating an environment ripe for profound change? Because as the historical narratives reveal, it was this complex interplay that really opened the door for figures like Queen Kodarani and, eventually the Shahmiris.
That's a great question. And from reading the sources, it really feels like a confluence, a perfect storm almost, where each weakness just fed into the next. The internal fighting made them vulnerable to external pressure. The external pressure drained resources, making internal problems worse. You see the cycle?
The vicious cycle.
Definitely. And into this tumultuous period steps a key figure who really embodied the Lohara dynasty's final, desperate struggle. Queen Kodarani. She was arguably the last significant Lohara ruler, described as a woman of remarkable intelligence and strategic capability.
So not a weak ruler then, personally?
Not personally, no. But her reign, from 1338 to 1339 CE, was just an undeniable whirlwind. It was marked by intense political intrigue within her own court nobles plotting against her, and constant military challenges from rival factions and these encroaching external forces. Janaraja's Rajataranjini, that seminal chronicle we mentioned, paints this vivid picture of her struggle.
What does Janaraja say specifically?
It describes how her rule was constantly undermined by ambitious nobles who felt threatened by a powerful queen, perhaps, and these formidable external threats. Despite her acumen, her skills, she was ultimately unable to stem the tide of decline. Her struggles absolutely created that crucial power vacuum, an opening that a shrewd and ambitious leader was inevitably going to exploit. She fought valiantly, trying to hold on to power in a state that was just, already fracturing. But the rot, you could say, was too deep.
A tragic figure in a way, holding onto a sinking ship.
Very much so. And that leads us directly to another pivotal figure who momentarily filled part of that vacuum.
Rinchen, the Buddhist prince.
Yeah, exactly. He arrived on the scene and briefly ruled Kashmir from 1320 to 1323 CE. What's really remarkable about Rinchen is that he was a Buddhist prince from Ladakh, a region to the east. His ascension to the throne was itself a testament to the chaos. He actually came to Kashmir initially as a refugee, fleeing a Mongol invasion in Ladakh.
So an outsider who rose to power through the chaos.
Precisely. And during his brief time on the throne, he sought a new religious identity. Apparently, he tried to convert to Hinduism first, but was reportedly denied by the Kashmiri Brahmins, maybe seen as too foreign or perhaps for political reasons.
Interesting. A rejection that had consequences.
Huge consequences, because that rejection led him to a pivotal conversion to Islam under the influence of the revered Sufi Saint Bulbul Shah. Now, this event, even though his direct political impact was short-lived, his reign only lasted 3 years. It was a profound turning point in Kashmir's religious history.
How so? What made it so significant?
Well, it effectively signaled the changing religious tides. It legitimized Islam at the highest level, even if briefly, and laid crucial groundwork for future shifts in the religious landscape. It showed Islam's growing appeal, perhaps its inclusivity, compared to the more rigid structures he encountered.
So it opened a door, religiously speaking.
Definitely. However, his assassination in 1323 CE, reportedly at the hands of a disgruntled relative or maybe a rival faction, the sources aren't entirely clear, unfortunately plunged Kashmir into even further instability. A rather weak ruler named Udayanadeva then ascended the throne.
Back to weak leadership.
Pretty much. He was largely seen as a puppet, incapable of stemming the tide of chaos or restoring any semblance of central authority. He essentially left the door wide open for the next major player.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, this whole period isn't just, a series of isolated historical events happening one after another. It's really a textbook example of a state in profound crisis.
Exactly.
Where internal decay, endemic corruption, these relentless external pressures, they all combine to create incredibly fertile ground for transformative change. Rinzhen's conversion, like you said, brief in its direct political impact, but religiously monumental. It wasn't just a personal choice, it was a public act. It legitimized Islam right at the top of Kashmiri society, paving the way for future shifts. It's a testament, really, to how even these short periods of rule can set long-term trajectories for an entire region, fundamentally altering its spiritual and cultural DNA.
Yeah.
And it also highlights a critical vulnerability, doesn't it? When a ruling elite becomes too rigid or perhaps too insular, it can inadvertently push capable individuals, like Rinzhen perhaps, towards alternative power structures or belief systems.
That's a really sharp point. So into this cauldron of instability, this opportunity, steps Shahmir. He's the figure who finally managed to seize power and establish a new, lasting order when so many others had either failed or just, maintained the chaotic status quo. But who exactly was he? And what was his secret? How did he manage not just to gain influence, but to fundamentally alter the course of a region?
The million-dollar question.
Right. Well, his origins, to be frank, are shrouded in a bit of historical ambiguity. We get conflicting accounts from different sources, which is pretty common for figures from this era.
Makes it tricky for historians.
Definitely. For instance, the Baharastani Shahi, that Persian chronicle compiled much later, suggests he hailed from the Swat Valley, which is in present-day Pakistan. It suggests he possibly belonged to a Turkic or Persian noble family who had migrated to Kashmir. This narrative kind of emphasizes his foreign, maybe more established lineage.
Okay, so one theory is he was an outsider.
Yes. But then, on the other hand, John Raja's Rajadarangini, the contemporary Sanskrit text, proposes a different narrative. John Raja suggests he was more of a local adventurer, a self-made man, someone who rose through sheer military and administrative skill within Kashmir itself, capitalizing on the chaos.
So an insider who knew the system.
Could be. Here's the essential nugget of knowledge, though, the key takeaway. Regardless of the exact lineage, whether he was an outsider who found his moment or a local who rose from obscurity, his capability, his strategic acumen, his sheer political will were undeniably formidable. That's the consistent thread across all the accounts. He was clearly very, very capable.
Right. The results speak for themselves, regardless of the origin story.
Exactly. And he certainly didn't just appear out of nowhere and stage a sudden takeover. His ascent in the Kashmiri court was gradual, it was highly strategic, and deeply calculated. He initially entered the service of the Lahara rulers. Eventually, he served as a trusted advisor and a military commander under Queen Kodarani, the very ruler we just discussed.
So he was right there, in the inner circle.
Right in the thick of it. This position gave him an invaluable insider's view of the crumbling administration, its myriad vulnerabilities, and the incredibly complex web of political factions. He knew who was who and where the weaknesses were.
Crucial intelligence.
Absolutely. And what's truly compelling here, I think, is that he wasn't just about brute force or being a skilled warrior. The sources suggest he was a master politician, a really shrewd networker. His charisma, his remarkable strategic thinking, and his uncanny ability to navigate that incredibly complex and treacherous political landscape that earned him the loyalty of key nobles and crucially influential military leaders.
So he built alliances.
He built his power base from within, patiently cultivating alliances, quietly consolidating influence as the Lahara dynasty weakened around him. He understood the art of the long game, it seems.
Played his cards right.
Very much so. The opportune moment finally arrived in 1339 CE. Following the death of Udayanadeva, remember, that weak ruler who came after Rinzhen and really struggled to maintain any control, Shahmir saw his window.
The time was right.
The kingdom was in disarray. The remaining Lahara administration was barely holding on, totally devoid of effective leadership or any widespread public support. Shahmir made his decisive move. He seized power with what seems to have been a well-planned coup, systematically overthrowing the remnants of the Lahara administration. It sounds less like a bloody battle and more like a decisive takeover of an already collapsing structure.
Filling the vacuum he'd observed for years.
Exactly. and then he boldly proclaimed himself the ruler under the title Shamsuddin Shahmir. This act, in 1339 CE, formally marked the establishment of the Shahmiri dynasty. And we have to stress this. This was not just a simple change of guard, not just a new family on the throne.
No, far more significant.
It was a truly transformative moment. It introduced formal Islamic governance to a region where Hinduism and Buddhism had been the dominant religious and cultural forces for centuries. It heralded a completely new era, one that would fundamentally reshape Kashmir's identity, its social fabric, its cultural landscape for centuries to come.
This really raises an important question, doesn't it? What does it truly take for an outsider, or maybe someone from uncertain origins, to not just gain influence, but to fundamentally alter the course of an entire region and establish a lasting dynasty?
Yeah, what's the formula?
Well, Shahmir's rise highlights the immense power of political astuteness and critically strategic timing, especially during periods of acute vulnerability. He recognized the systemic weaknesses, he cultivated those alliances you mentioned, and he acted decisively when the state was at its most fragile.
Didn't hesitate.
Exactly. His ability to synthesize military strength with political cunning, rather than relying solely on brute force, is a recurring theme, I think, in the successful founding of enduring dynasties. And it's particularly evident here in the way he integrated himself into the existing power structures before taking control. It showcases that blend of pragmatism and ambition that often defines such transformative figures.
So, Shahmir establishes the dynasty as Shamsuddin. Now, while his personal reign was relatively short, just 3 years, 1339 to 1342 CE, it was absolutely critical. It was a foundational period for everything that came next. He wasn't just a conqueror, he was, in a sense, an architect, laying the very bedrock for Islamic rule in Kashmir.
Setting the tone.
Precisely. His primary challenge right from the get-go was unifying this incredibly diverse populace, a population that had been torn by years of conflict and now faced a new ruling power and a new dominant religion. You had these deeply entrenched Hindu communities, pockets of Buddhists still around, and now a growing number of newly converted Muslims. Each group had its own customs, its own loyalties.
A tricky balancing act.
Hugely tricky. Shamsuddin clearly understood that simply imposing his will by force would likely lead to more rebellion, more instability. So instead, he adopted this remarkably pragmatic and, you could say, conciliatory approach.
Smart move.
Very smart. He skillfully blended Islamic principles of governance with existing Kashmiri traditions and administrative practices. He wanted to ensure acceptance, or at least tolerance, among his new subjects. This wasn't about radical imposition, it was about judicious integration. A clever and really far-sighted move for long-term stability and legitimacy. He showed a clear understanding that a stable state needed the consent, or at least the acquiescence, of its diverse population.
So adapting to the local context rather than just imposing an external model.
Exactly. And he focused immediately and vigorously on administrative consolidation. He recognized that effective governance was absolutely key to stability. He reorganized the entire revenue system, which had apparently become utterly chaotic and exploitative under the crumbling Laharas.
Cleaning house administratively.
Big time. Historian R.K. Parmu highlights how these reforms included more systematic assessment of land and agricultural produce. They moved away from arbitrary levies toward a more streamlined, predictable tax collection. This not only provided a stable and robust financial base for his fledgling kingdom, but also probably reduced the burden on the peasants, earning him some popular support.
Building legitimacy from the ground up.
Right. And beyond fiscal reforms, he significantly strengthened the military essential for securing his new dominion and strategically appointed loyal nobles and officials to key positions across the kingdom. This ensured his power base was secure and his directives would actually be carried out effectively throughout the land. These appointments often seem to transcend old Lohara loyalties, rewarding competence and, crucially, loyalty to the new regime.
Meritocracy to some extent.
Perhaps the beginnings of it, yes. Rewarding loyalty and skill over just lineage. In terms of religious policy, he encouraged the spread of Islam, but crucially through peaceful means. Often this was under the guidance and influence of these influential Sufi saints like Bulbul Shah again.
The Sufi influence seems quite important early on.
Very. These Sufi mystics, with their message often emphasizing love, tolerance, spiritual equality, that resonated deeply with parts of the local population and facilitated gradual conversions rather than forced ones. Shamsuddin's policies were, by most accounts, relatively inclusive. He largely avoided widespread persecution of non-Muslims, seeming to understand that forced conversions would only breed resentment.
Pragmatism again.
Absolutely. Furthermore, he was also a shrewd diplomat. He established crucial diplomatic relations with neighboring powers like the Delhi Sultanate and the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia. This helped secure Kashmir's nascent borders against potential invasions and further destabilization. It bought him crucial time to consolidate internally.
Securing the perimeter while building the house?
Well put. Now, Shamsuddin's untimely death in 1342 CE, after just 3 years on the throne, undoubtedly cut short his ambitious plans. He probably had more he wanted to do. However, his brief reign left an undeniable and lasting legacy. He didn't just seize power, he built a foundation. He left behind a remarkably stable kingdom, considering the chaos he inherited, with a functioning administration. He effectively paved the way for further consolidation and expansion by his successors. His reign really set the tone for what Kashmir under the Shahmirs could become.
Building on that point about Shamsuddin's pragmatic approach, it's crucial to understand that such a strategy wasn't just, an option. It was almost a necessity for a new Islamic power trying to take root in a historically Hindu and Buddhist land.
Had to be done that way.
I think so. For long-term success, his immediate recognition of the need for pragmatism, for blending Islamic governance with Kashmiri traditions, it wasn't just clever, it was really a masterclass in long-term nation building. It demonstrated that true power consolidation often comes not just from force, but from the judicious integration of existing societal fabrics, winning the buy-in, or at least the tolerance, of the populace.
Makes sense.
His reforms were absolutely foundational. They showed that successful governance isn't solely about military might, but about intelligent, adaptable administrative policy that considers and respects the existing social and cultural landscape. He built a flexible framework that his successors could, and indeed did, build upon. That's what makes his short reign so disproportionately impactful, I believe.
Okay, so after Shamsuddin, the Shahmiri dynasty enters this period of transition. We get a few rulers coming and going. Now, maybe they weren't as dramatically impactful as their founder or, the later great rulers we'll get to, but each played a vital part, however small, in solidifying the dynasty's hold and shaping its evolving identity before we reach the really big players.
That consolidation phase.
Exactly. First up was Jamshed Shah. He rules from 1342 to 1344 CE. His reign was short, unfortunately troubled, lasting only 2 years. He immediately faced significant internal challenges, primarily from rival factions within the court, including his own brothers, who constantly sought to undermine his authority.
Sibling rivalry rearing its head early.
Right away. He struggled to maintain the stability his father had so carefully established, which kind of indicates that the seeds of dynastic strife were already present, He seems to have lacked the political acumen to manage these competing interests effectively, and his rule was cut short pretty quickly when he was overthrown by his younger brother, Alauddin, in a swift palace coup.
So instability returned quickly.
It did. It's easy to dismiss these short reigns, but they often reveal these underlying vulnerabilities that can definitely resurface later.
Good point.
That brother who overthrew him was Alauddin. He successfully took the throne and ruled from 1344 to 1355 CE. His reign, lasting a more substantial 11 years, saw continued efforts to strengthen the dynasty's foundations rather than making radical changes.
More consolidation, less transformation.
Exactly. Recognizing the persistent external threats and the need for internal cohesion, he focused diligently on fortifying Kashmir's defenses, shoring up strategic mountain passes, building new garrisons. At the same time, he worked on expanding trade networks, particularly with the bustling markets of Central Asia via the Silk Route, and also with various states in northern India.
Boosting the economy.
Right. This brought in much-needed revenue. Kashmir's exquisite saffron, those famous shawls, other high-value goods found new markets, and it also facilitated cultural exchange. His administration diligently built upon the reforms initiated by Shamsuddin, especially in areas like revenue collection and military organization, showing a commitment to continuity.
Building on the foundation.
And Alauddin also continued to patronize Islamic scholars and Sufi saints, further promoting the peaceful spread of Islam in the valley and reinforcing the dynasty's religious legitimacy. So while his reign might not have been as dramatically transformative as some of his successors, it was crucial in steadily solidifying the dynasty's hold over Kashmir and improving its economic standing.
Steady hand on the tiller.
Pretty much. Then came Shihabuddin Shah, another of Shamsuddin's sons, who ruled from 1355 to 1373 CE. He enjoyed a longer reign, 18 years. His rule was notably marked by more assertive military campaigns. He actively sought to secure Kashmir's borders and assert the dynasty's authority over neighboring regions like Ladakh and areas along the Punjab plains.
Expanding outwards.
Somewhat. These campaigns seem to have been less about outright conquest and more about establishing buffer zones and securing those vital trade routes. Shihabuddin was also recognized for his significant patronage of art and architecture. He commissioned the construction of numerous mosques and shrines, which clearly reflected the growing influence of Islamic culture within Kashmir. These often blended local Kashmiri woodworking traditions with Persian architectural styles.
The cultural synthesis continues.
Definitely. His rule also saw a significant influx of Persian scholars, poets, and artisans into the region, drawn by the court's patronage. This cultural migration really enriched the court's intellectual and artistic environment, laying more groundwork for the cultural efflorescence, the blooming, that was still to come.
These interim reigns, even though they might seem less dramatic in the historical narratives, are absolutely crucial for understanding the Shahmiri dynasty's long-term success.
How so?
Well, they demonstrated dynasty gradually embedding itself, expanding its influence through both military might and economic connections, and critically integrating new cultural elements, attracting foreign talent. Even as internal struggles continued, maybe simmered beneath the surface, there was this consistent, albeit sometimes slow, process of consolidation and cultural assimilation happening.
So slow and steady progress.
Exactly. It's often this quiet, steady, persistent work, the strengthening of defenses, the expansion of trade, the consistent patronage of religious and intellectual life that underpins the more celebrated reigns later on. It provides the stability and the infrastructure upon which a golden age can actually be built. They were the essential connective tissue of the dynasty, ensuring that the initial foundations laid by Shamsuddin weren't squandered.
That makes a lot of sense. And this brings us to a crucial turning point, a really fascinating study in contrasting leadership styles. The Shahmiri dynasty gives us two wildly different rulers, father and son, who represent almost opposite approaches to governance and religious policy. It's a compelling juxtaposition. Prepare for a particularly illuminating period here. Let's start with the more controversial and, in many ways, perhaps tragic figure, Sultan Sikandar.
Ah, yes, Sikandar Butshikan.
Exactly. Sultan Sikandar, who reigned from 1389 to 1413 CE, is undoubtedly one of the most controversial figures in the history of the Shahmiri dynasty, and really in Kashmiri history as a whole. His very title, Sikandar Butshikan, meaning the iconoclast or idol breaker, tells you a great deal about his reign right from the start.
Leaves little room for interpretation.
Not much. He was apparently heavily influenced by his chief minister, a man named Suhafat, who was himself a Hindu convert to Islam. This dynamic between a staunchly orthodox Muslim ruler and a convert in such a powerful position is particularly intriguing. Historical accounts suggest Suhafat played a significant role in advocating for the strict enforcement of Islamic law.
A zealous convert, perhaps.
The sources hint at that. Sikandar's reign was defined by a strict adherence to Islamic orthodoxy, which manifested as undeniable and severe intolerance towards non-Muslims, particularly Hindus and Buddhists in the valley. According to both Janaraj's Rajataranjini, the contemporary Sanskrit chronicle, which is understandably remarkably critical of him, and Baharsani Shahi, the later Persian account, Sikandar ordered the systematic destruction of several Hindu temples.
This is the iconoclasm part.
This is it. A very specific and profoundly memorable detail here is the targeting of the iconic Martan Sun Temple. It was one of Kashmir's most magnificent architectural marvels, and it was extensively defaced during his reign. While it wasn't entirely razed to the ground, its grandeur was severely marred, clearly as a symbol of the old faith being suppressed. A deliberate act of cultural erasure. It certainly reads that way. Beyond the destruction of religious sites, he imposed the jizya tax on non-Muslims. That's effectively a poll tax levied on non-Muslim subjects in an Islamic state, and it placed a significant economic burden on them. He also banned Hindu festivals and public religious processions, restricting the open practice of non-Islamic faiths.
Making non-Muslim life increasingly difficult.
Very difficult. Furthermore, he rigorously enforced Sharia law. This meant the implementation of Islamic legal principles in various aspects of daily life, from commerce to personal conduct. It often included strict punishments for infractions and represented a fundamental shift in the legal framework that had governed Kashmir for centuries. These actions led to profound social and cultural upheaval.
You can imagine.
And tragically, they resulted in large-scale migrations of Hindu scholars, priests, and artisans who sought refuge in other parts of India, taking their invaluable knowledge and skills with them. It's noted that when he ascended the throne, he faced relatively little opposition because the Hindu and Buddhist communities were already weakened and lacked unified leadership due to all the preceding chaos we discussed.
So the ground was unfortunately fertile for these policies.
Yes, which unfortunately allowed his harsh policies to take root more easily and broadly. While these policies undoubtedly consolidated Muslim dominance in the valley, they also deeply alienated significant sections of the population and left a deep, painful, and lasting impact on Kashmir's demographic and cultural landscape.
It's interesting that you highlight Sikandar's administrative and military skills because the sources do point to his effectiveness in those domains. However, it's absolutely critical to balance that effectiveness with the profound human cost detailed in accounts like Janaraja's, which paint a very different, much darker picture of his social impact. It really raises the question, can a leader truly be considered capable if their policies cause such widespread suffering and alienation among their own populace?
That's a crucial ethical question, isn't it?
Absolutely. This period of strict orthodoxy, while centralizing power in some ways, fundamentally reshaped the social fabric in a harsh way. And the departure of those scholars and artisans arguably created an intellectual and cultural vacuum that must have taken generations to even partially fill.
That's a really crucial point to make. Despite his highly controversial religious policies, it is important to note that Sikandar was indeed recognized, even by critical sources, as a capable administrator and military leader in other respects. He certainly strengthened Kashmir's defenses, constructing new forts, garrisoning troops strategically to ensure the stability of his kingdom against both internal dissent and external threats.
Practical matters of statecraft.
Yes, he actively worked to expand trade networks, which indicates a pragmatic understanding of economic needs, even alongside his religious zeal. He also actively promoted Islamic scholarship. He established madrasas, centers of Islamic learning, and patronized Persian scholars, which undoubtedly enriched the intellectual life of his court, albeit with a very particular religious focus.
So promoting one specific type of learning.
Right. Perhaps his most enduring architectural contribution, and one that stands in, well, stark contrast to his destructive tendencies, was the construction of the Jamia Masjid in Srinagar. This is a magnificent wooden mosque completed under his patronage that remains a towering symbol of Kashmir's Islamic heritage even today.
An architectural gem.
It truly is, a beautiful blend of Indo-Persian architectural styles with intricate Kashmiri wood carvings. It's a real testament to the skill of the artisans he both patronized and, in other instances, displaced.
The irony.
Exactly. So, Sikandar's legacy is undeniably complex and divisive. He's widely criticized for his intolerance and the cultural destruction he oversaw, often remembered as this figure of controversy, even fear. Yet he is also credited for significant architectural and educational contributions that undeniably laid further groundwork for Kashmir's transformation into a major center of Muslim culture. His reign, though deeply divisive, was a clear turning point, solidifying the Shahmiri dynasty's authority in a very particular and often brutal way.
A consolidation through imposition.
Precisely. Now, following Sikandar, his son Ali Shah ruled from 1413 to 1420 CE. His reign was relatively calm, almost uneventful compared to his father's. He primarily focused on maintaining the status quo rather than pursuing aggressive new policies or grand projects.
A period of relative quiet?
Somewhat. However, Ali Shah did face challenges from rebellious nobles and struggled at times to assert his authority effectively. Particularly, there was apparently a power struggle with Suhapat, Sikandar's former minister, who tried to dominate the court. There's even a story that Ali Shah attempted a pilgrimage to Mecca, but was persuaded by his chief minister to return, only to be overthrown and killed shortly after.
So still underlying instability.
Yes, the calm was perhaps superficial. His short and somewhat unstable reign essentially served as a transitional period, a pause before the next major figure, his brother Zainul Abidin, ascended the throne.
And this is where the narrative takes a dramatic turn.
A huge turn. And that brings us to Sultan Zainul Abidin, who ruled from 1420 all the way to 1470 CE. He's fondly known as Bucha, which means the Great King in Kashmiri. He's almost universally regarded as the most enlightened and beloved ruler of the Shahmiri dynasty, a true beacon of statesmanship and tolerance.
Quite the reputation.
And well-deserved by all accounts. His remarkable 50-year reign is widely considered the undisputed golden age of Kashmir. It was characterized by profound religious tolerance, vibrant cultural flourishing, and remarkable economic prosperity. What truly stands out about Bucha is how his policies stood in stark, almost revolutionary contrast to those of his father, Sikandar.
A complete reversal.
Absolutely. Zainal Abidin actively and deliberately worked to heal the deep communal divisions and the societal wounds that had been caused by that earlier period of religious intolerance.
How did he go about doing that? What were the key policies?
Well, his most significant achievement was his unwavering commitment to promoting religious harmony and coexistence. He clearly recognized the widespread alienation and the human cost caused by Sikandar's policies. So first, he immediately revoked the hated jizya tax. That was a huge step, instantly alleviating a major burden on non-Muslims.
Big symbolic and practical move.
Huge. More profoundly, he actively invited exiled Hindu scholars, priests, and artisans to return to Kashmir. He provided incentives for them to come back to their ancestral homes and resume their professions. He didn't just welcome them, he extended royal patronage to them.
Actively bringing back the talent that had fled.
Exactly. And according to Mohibul Hassan in Kashmir, under the sultans, Zainal Abidin went even further. He actually rebuilt several Hindu temples that had been destroyed or damaged during his father's reign, including important sacred sites like the temples at Avantapur. He also ensured that non-Muslims had equal access to justice through the local courts, emphasizing impartiality regardless of faith.
Restoring rights and rebuilding trust.
Yes. His court became this truly vibrant center of religious diversity. You had Hindus, Muslims, and Buddhists not only coexisting peacefully, but actively collaborating. Imagine this. Royal decrees reportedly encouraged interfaith marriages. Scholars from different traditions were debating philosophy in the court. There was even shared patronage for festivals. It fostered this unique syncretic culture where the lines between faiths sometimes blurred, creating a powerful sense of unity and loyalty among his subjects. This earned him widespread admiration that genuinely persists in Kashmiri folklore to this day. He's remembered as the Great King.
This comparison between Sikandar and Zainal Abidin is truly pivotal, isn't it? It illustrates so vividly that even within the exact same dynastic framework, different rulers can harbor profoundly different visions and consequently leave wildly divergent impacts on their society.
Night and day.
Completely. Sikandar, driven by that rigid orthodoxy, consolidated power, yes, but at the terrible cost of widespread social upheaval, cultural destruction, and demographic shifts. In stark contrast, Zainal Abidin built an enduring legacy through deep inclusivity, through cultural development, through economic prosperity. He demonstrated that true strength and long-term stability can come not from enforced uniformity, but from a unity derived from diversity.
A powerful lesson.
It really raises an important question for us, looking back. What lessons can we draw from these contrasting approaches to leadership, particularly in diverse societies today that grapple with different belief systems and historical grievances? The choices made by leaders, even centuries ago, resonate so powerfully with contemporary challenges of managing diverse populations and fostering integration rather than division.
Absolutely. And Zainal Abidin wasn't just about religious tolerance. He was also a monumental patron of art, literature, and crafts. He effectively transformed Kashmir into this bustling cultural hub, attracting talent from all across Asia. He introduced Persian as the official court language, which wasn't just a linguistic change. It facilitated this massive intellectual and literary exchange with the broader Islamic world.
Connecting Kashmir outwards.
Yes, but crucially, he wasn't prescriptive about it. He proactively encouraged the translation of important Sanskrit texts, like the epic Mahabharata and Janaraja's own Rajataranjini, into Persian. Think about that, translating the history critical of his father.
That shows real confidence and a commitment to knowledge itself.
Doesn't it? These translations not only preserved Kashmir's rich literary heritage for future generations, but also made it accessible to a much broader audience. It bridged cultural divides, ensured that knowledge was shared across religious lines. And he also actively promoted the indigenous Kashmiri language itself, laying the foundation for its literary development, encouraging local expression.
So both international connection and local development.
Exactly. During his reign, renowned mystical poets like Lal Ded, who was a Hindu mystic, and Nand Rishi, a Muslim Sufi saint, flourished. Their works beautifully reflected that syncretic blend of Hindu and Islamic spiritual traditions, the unique Kashmiri synthesis that celebrated shared human experience and spiritual quests.
A real flowering of local culture.
Absolutely. And his patronage extended deeply and strategically into traditional Kashmiri crafts. These quickly became synonymous with the region's identity and gained international renown. He actively encouraged the development of specialized skills in papier-mâché, apparently inviting artisans from Samarkand to teach new techniques.
Wow, bringing in international experts.
Yes, And carpet weaving, introducing Persian designs and knotting methods, the legendary shawl making, refining the intricate pashmina process, and sophisticated wood carving. He provided artisans with essential resources, protected their trade, expanded markets to showcase their incredible work, setting up royal workshops and guilds.
Serious investment in the creative economy.
Big time. These crafts gained international fame. Kashmiri shawls and carpets became prized commodities in places as far-flung as Central Asia, Persia, India, and eventually even Europe. Srinagar, the capital, became a truly vibrant intellectual and artistic center, attracting scholars, poets, artisans from across Asia, a real hub of cross-cultural exchange.
Sounds like a truly remarkable period.
It really does. And economically and infrastructurally, Zainul Abidin's reign saw monumental advancements too. He initiated extensive irrigation projects, recognizing the crucial role of water in agricultural prosperity. The most famous of these was the Zainagar Canal, a massive undertaking that dramatically increased agricultural productivity by bringing water to previously arid lands.
Infrastructure driving the economy.
Exactly. Supporting the flourishing cultivation of high-value crops like rice, saffron, various fruit orchards. These projects were critical for ensuring food security, boosting the rural economy, sustaining a growing population. The Sultan also shrewdly strengthened Kashmir's position as a key hub on the Silk Route. He invested in roads, inns for travelers, secure trade routes, facilitating bustling trade with Central Asia, Persia, India. His trade policies specifically attracted merchants and boosted the production of those high-value goods, saffron, exquisite shawls, refined metalware.
A holistic approach to development.
Very much so. And his administration was also known for its strong emphasis on justice, public welfare, and efficiency. He apparently established a sophisticated system of spies not for oppression, but to monitor officials and prevent corruption.
Keeping the administration honest.
Right, ensuring that his policies genuinely benefited the common people, rather than just enriching the elite. He personally heard petitions, administered justice. This deep focus on public welfare, combined with his unparalleled cultural and economic achievements, earned him that beloved title of Busha and a lasting, almost legendary place in Kashmiri folklore. A memory of a truly golden age.
It's clear why his reign is remembered so fondly. A stark contrast indeed.
Sadly, though, even golden ages, no matter how bright or long-lasting, eventually come to an end. After Sultan Zainul Abidin's remarkably long and prosperous reign, spanning that half-century, the Shahmiri dynasty, unfortunately, began its slow but inevitable decline.
The momentum couldn't be sustained.
It seems not. His successors simply couldn't fill the giant shoes left by Busha. They lacked his unique blend of vision, administrative acumen, and that inclusive spirit.
Hard act to follow.
Extremely. Their reigns, after 1470 CE, were increasingly marked by internal strife, rampant factionalism among the nobility, and consistently weak central leadership. Successors like Haidar Shah, Hassan Shah, and Muhammad Shah, who actually held the throne multiple times due to repeated overthrowings and restorations, they just lacked the political strength and decisiveness of their forebears.
The internal conflicts returned.
With a vengeance. The erosion of central authority was significant, palpable. You see the growing influence of powerful nobles and regional chieftains who constantly undermined the Sultan's directives and vied for control of key offices and territories. As the Baharistani Shahi notes, disputes over succession and factionalism weakened the dynasty, making it increasingly vulnerable both from within and without.
The classic signs of dynastic decline.
Absolutely. These constant power struggles led to frequent changes in rulers, instability, and a general breakdown of efficient governance. Nobles started building their own power bases again, effectively fragmenting the kingdom's authority.
Undermining the center.
Exactly. This internal weakness ultimately set the stage for the dynasty's end. The final Shahmiri ruler was Habib Shah, who reigned briefly from 1557 to 1561 CE. His weak leadership and his utter inability to manage the escalating internal conflicts and the growing assertiveness of his powerful nobles simply hastened the inevitable end.
Final straw.
Much. The vacuum of effective royal power allowed for the decisive rise of the Chaks. Now, the Chaks were a powerful Kashmiri clan, possibly of Dardic origin, who had actually served under the Shahmiris for generations. They'd been steadily accumulating influence and military might within the system.
So they knew the system inside out?
Intimately. They were perfectly positioned to capitalize on the dynasty's terminal weaknesses. They seized the opportune moment and overthrew Habib Shah in 1561 CE, marking the formal end of over 2 centuries of Shahmiri rule. It's worth noting, though, that the transition, despite being a dynastic change, was apparently relatively smooth in terms of administrative continuity.
Oh, interesting. Not a complete break.
It seems not entirely. The Chaks, Rather than completely dismantling the previous system, wisely built upon the existing administrative and cultural foundations that had been established by the Shahmiris. It demonstrates that deep-seated institutions can sometimes outlast individual rulers or even entire dynasties.
That's a fascinating point. The decline isn't just about labeling rulers as weak, is it? It's often a cumulative effect of these internal fissures widening over time, perhaps a loss of the founding vision, and a fundamental inability to adapt to emerging power dynamics and new challenges, whether they're external or internal.
A gradual process, not just one bad ruler.
Precisely. And what's fascinating here, as you mentioned, is how the Chaks, rather than engaging in wholesale destruction of the previous system, instead leveraged and built upon the existing administrative and cultural structures. This demonstrates a crucial historical pattern. Continuity often exists even in moments of seemingly drastic regime change.
The foundations were strong enough to survive the change at the top.
Exactly. It's a testament to the enduring nature of institutions, administrative practices, cultural traditions, even as the names on the throne shift. It's a reminder that truly impactful reigns, like Zayn-ul Abidin's, can leave an imprint so profound that its benefits, its structures, persist even after the dynasty itself has faded into history.
So, after wading through over 2 centuries of Shahmiri rule, what's the big takeaway? What profound contributions did they leave behind that still shape Kashmir today? What makes it the unique region we know, this distinct cultural landscape on the subcontinent?
Well, there are several key areas, I think.
Okay, let's start with the administration. What did they set up?
First, their administrative innovations were foundational. They introduced a more sophisticated, centralized administrative system, which was significantly influenced by Persian and Islamic models. This brought a new level of organization and potentially efficiency compared to what came before.
How did they organize it?
They systematically divided the kingdom into these well-defined administrative units called parganas. Think of them as districts. Each pargana was essentially a self-contained unit with its own local administrator, appointed by the central government, responsible for everything from tax collection to maintaining local law and order. This made the vast, often mountainous region far more governable and ensured a steadier flow of revenue to the state.
Made practical sense.
Absolutely. They also established a judicial system that was primarily based on Islamic principles, with qazis or Islamic judges overseeing legal matters across the land. This was a significant shift from previous Hindu legal frameworks. And a key development, especially under Zayn-ul Abidin, was the introduction of a merit-based bureaucracy.
We touched on that appointing based on skill, not just connections.
Exactly. A truly forward-thinking step for the time, appointing officials based on competence, skill, integrity, rather than solely on loyalty, family connections, or even religious affiliation in his case. That's a huge step towards more modern governance. And finally, they maintained a strong standing army and invested in constructing strategic forts and garrisons across the valley. This really did ensure stability for long stretches over those 2 centuries, protecting the kingdom from both external threats and internal rebellions, and allowing for those periods of peace and prosperity we discussed.
Okay, so solid administrative and military foundations. What about culture? That seems like a huge part of their legacy.
Oh, absolutely. The incredible, rich cultural synthesis they fostered is arguably their most lasting legacy. The Shahmiri dynasty played this pivotal role in blending Persian, Central Asian, and existing Kashmiri cultural traditions, creating a truly unique, syncretic identity.
How did that blending happen?
Well, the introduction of Persian as the court language was key. It wasn't just a linguistic change. It facilitated that massive intellectual and literary exchange, opening Kashmir to new ideas, literary forms, administrative practices from the wider Persianate world. Those Persian chronicles we mentioned, Baharstani-Shahi, Tabaqat-i-Akbari, they provide invaluable insights into the dynasty's history and cultural achievements precisely because of that linguistic connection.
But they didn't just import culture, right?
Not at all. They didn't just look outward. They also actively supported the development of indigenous Kashmiri literature. Remember those mystical poets like Lal Ded and Nun Rishi? Their profound works beautifully bridged religious divides, spoke to universal spiritual truths, and they flourished under this dynasty, contributing to a rich tradition of indigenous poetry that resonated with both Hindu and Muslim populations.
And the architecture.
Undeniable. They introduced distinct Islamic architectural elements, but often adapted and blended them beautifully with local Kashmiri wooden construction techniques. The Jamia Masjid in Srinagar, built during Sikandar's reign but a testament to the era's craftsmanship, stands as a masterpiece of wooden architecture, blending Persian and Kashmiri styles in a truly unique, harmonious way. And Zainul Abidin's patronage, as we discussed, extended to secular contributions to grand bridges, new cities, canals, further enhancing the valley's infrastructure and its aesthetic.
And the crafts. We have to mention the crafts again.
Of course, the renowned crafts. The deliberate promotion, especially under Zainul Abidin, made Kashmiri artisans famous across Asia. Their papier-mâché, refined with exquisite designs, their intricate shawl making, especially the pashmina, their magnificent carpet weaving, their delicate wood carving. These crafts gained international fame, boosted the economy significantly, and became utterly synonymous with the region's identity, something Kashmir is still celebrated for globally today.
It really feels like Zainul Abidin, in particular, curated this unique cultural identity.
He certainly nurtured it and allowed it to flourish. And finally, their impact on economic prosperity was massive and transformative. The Shahmiri rulers, again, particularly Zainul Abidin, invested heavily and strategically in agriculture, improving those vast irrigation systems like the incredible Zainagar Canal, systematically reclaiming wasteland for cultivation. This dramatically increased agricultural productivity, supported high-value crops like saffron and rice, and ensured food security for the growing population.
Using that natural wealth effectively.
Absolutely. And Kashmir's strategic location on the Silk Route was leveraged to its fullest potential. They cemented its role as a key hub for bustling trade with Central Asia, Persia, various parts of India. Their economic policies ensured a steady flow of revenue, which was then wisely reinvested in public welfare, vital infrastructure projects, and that unparalleled cultural patronage, creating this virtuous cycle of growth and stability that really uplifted the entire region for generations.
Wow, quite a legacy across the board.
This section truly highlights the why it matters for modern Kashmir, doesn't it? The administrative structures they put in place, the unique architectural styles that emerged, those specific craft traditions that gained international renown. These weren't just ephemeral things that disappeared when the dynasty fell.
No, they stuck around.
They became foundational elements of Kashmiri identity, enduring far beyond the dynasty's political lifespan. This is where we clearly see how historical policy, the choices rulers make, directly translates into enduring cultural distinctiveness that defines a region for centuries. Zainul Abidin's vision, in particular, left an indelible imprint that truly defined the character of the region for a very long time, demonstrating how a ruler's ethos and their policy choices can profoundly shape a society's long-term trajectory, even long after the initial political power wanes.
So let's try to wrap this up. What does this all mean for you listening? We've journeyed through the tumultuous rise of Shahmir, emerging from the chaos of the declining Lohara dynasty. We've explored the wildly contrasting reigns of his successors, from Sikandar the Iconoclast, whose rigid orthodoxy brought both consolidation and severe upheaval, to the beloved Zainul Abidin Busha, who ushered in a true golden age of unparalleled tolerance, cultural flourishing, and economic prosperity. And finally, we witnessed the dynasty's eventual decline and that smooth transition to the Chak rulers.
Quite a sweep of history.
It really is. This entire narrative profoundly and irrevocably shaped Kashmir's religious, cultural, and political identity. It established Islam as the dominant faith while, particularly under Zainul Abidin, fostering a truly unique, syncretic culture that embraced diversity. It shows how a single dynasty can be this crucible for immense social, religious, and economic change. And it demonstrates that even in periods of profound societal transformation and religious shifts, leadership can choose starkly different pathways of intolerance or paths of inclusion with vastly different long-term consequences for a society and its people.
And that leads us to a final, perhaps provocative thought. It raises an important and maybe very timely question. In a world still grappling with diverse cultures, competing beliefs, the ever-present tension between tradition and change, what can the enduring legacy of the Shahmiri dynasty, particularly that stark contrast between Sultan Sikandar's uncompromising orthodoxy and Sultan Zainul Abidin's profound pragmatic tolerance, teach us? What can it teach us about the enduring power of inclusivity versus rigid adherence to doctrine in shaping the identity, the prosperity, and the stability of a region? Consider how leaders, even centuries ago, faced choices that echo so deeply in our contemporary world as societies navigate integration, diversity, and their own historical legacies. Perhaps this deep dive will encourage you to explore further, maybe even delve into John Rajdas Rajahamnjini yourself, or look into similar examples of cultural synthesis and conflict around the globe. The past so often holds keys to understanding our present, and maybe even navigating our future.